Well, actually, my talk is about Martin Luther King, and I have a poem that I wrote a while back that deals with racism. First of all, I want to say, Gina, that was such a beautiful prayer you gave this morning. I mean, I really felt that it was really deep, and it just touched me in the right place. Hey, it's nice to be touched in the right place, right? All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here today, and thank you all for coming this morning. Thank you again, Reverend Gina, for allowing me to speak today. I wanted to honor the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for his birthday, which was January 15th. And this year, he would have been 96 years old. And I have a spiritual poem that deals with the subject of racism, which I like to talk about. Dr. King, like all men, had his human flaws, but he was such a beautiful light. And he changed the world for the better. And I thought it would be appropriate time to do this because his holiday is tomorrow. Along with George Washington, he's only one of two Americans to have his birthday celebrated as a national holiday. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is celebrated every third Monday of January, close to his birthday on January 15th. First, a little bit about Dr. King that made him such an incredible man. Does anybody know what Martin Luther King's birth name was? Nah, nobody knows. Do you think this is a trick question? Like if I asked you what Ulysses S. Grant, our 18th president's first name was, how many of you would think it was Ulysses? Well, you'd be wrong. His first name was Hiram. And his middle initial, he didn't have a middle initial, it was an S. His middle name was Ulysses. It was Hiram Ulysses Grant. And let's see, I had something else I wanted to say about that. Okay, so Martin Luther King's birth name was Michael. His father was a powerful minister in Atlanta, and he traveled to Germany in 1934 and was inspired by the great 16th century Protestant reformer, Martin Luther. In fact, his father was so moved by Martin Luther that he changed him and his son's name from Michael King Sr. and Jr. to Martin Luther King Jr. and Sr. While I'm throwing out names, let me diverge from Dr. King for a moment and mention one name that I always loved, that was an important person in history, but probably nobody's ever heard of him. So I'm going to ask you, has anybody ever heard of the name Hannibal Hamlin? Hannibal Hamlin. Somebody's thinking here. All right. Hannibal Hamlin was the governor of Maine, and he strongly opposed slavery. He was just a heartbeat away from being the president of the United States. He was Abraham Lincoln's first vice president from 1856 to 1860. And he's forgotten in history, but here's some interesting facts about Dr. King. When he was 15 years old, he started college. He did so well in high school, he skipped 2 grades, the 9th and 12th grade. I'll be honest with you, I never did that. I almost went back 2 grades, but both his father and his grandfather and himself, they went to Morehouse College. That was the only college at the time in the world that admitted only African American men. It was there that Dr. King first learned about Gandhi and nonviolent civil disobedience. Martin Luther King survived an early assassination attempt. A lady asked him, "Are you Martin Luther King?" at a book signing in Harlem in 1958. When he said yes, she plunged a 7-inch letter opener into his chest. The tip of the blade barely missed his aorta. The surgeon who saved his life told him that if he just sneezed, he would have been killed, and the world would have had a great loss because of that. He was in prison 29 times, mostly for acts of civil disobedience. But sometimes these charges were completely drummed up, like the time he was arrested in Montgomery, Alabama, for going 30 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. They locked him up for days. When I was younger and I was getting high, smoking some kind of something, I don't even know what it was, I was driving on the New York Thruway, going 25 miles an hour in a 55-mile-an-hour speed zone, and I thought I was speeding. A cop pulls up, must have slowed down 30 miles an hour next to me, and starts pointing like that, and I thought I was going too fast. So he pulled over, my car reeked, I jumped out of the car, I was freaked out, I thought I didn't want him to smell the car. And what the police officer did was he gave me a lecture. If that was Dr. King at that time, he would have got the electric chair. So I'm sure some of you watched the original Star Trek program with William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy. Well, Dr. King was a Trekkie. Who knew? He loved Nichelle Nichols. She was the groundbreaking African-American actress who portrayed Lieutenant Uhura on the show. The FBI monitored him for years, and they started tracking Dr. King in 1955. The FBI director at the time was J. Edgar Hoover, and he was obsessed with King with a fanatical devotion to discredit him. After Dr. King delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech in 1963, an FBI memo came out that called Dr. King the most dangerous and effective leader in the country. Actually, the most famous and dangerous and effective Negro leader in the country. I get the idea that J. Edgar didn't like Mr. King too much, but he was correct in his assessment. He was the most effective leader. In Memphis, the night before Dr. King's death in 1968, he was only 39 years old. He said, and I cannot speak like this man spoke, because he was such a beautiful orator, but what he said was, like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know that tonight, we as people will get to the promised land. He got the idea of nonviolent protests from Jesus and Gandhi. King said in his book, Strive Toward Freedom. He wrote a book, Strive Toward Freedom, that his philosophy of nonviolence was inspired by Jesus, while he found inspiration in the techniques of nonviolence from Gandhi. King identified several principles which he learned from his two mentors, Gandhi and Jesus. The key aspect of Gandhi's philosophy, who is better known as Mahatma, which means great soul or great self. And Gandhi was one of the most admired men of the 20th century. His life centered around the principles of truth, nonviolence, compassion, and kindness. He believed that this philosophy should be practiced, not just theorized. Gandhi's philosophy was action-oriented. He was an activist, and he sought to improve the lives of others through nonviolent means. How much better would this world be today if we upheld these principles? Gandhi's philosophy was inspired many leaders, including Dr. King, Nelson Mandela, and the Dalai Lama. Not bad company. Listen again to these words that both Gandhi and King aspired to and practiced in the face of deep hatred and physical brutality. Truth, nonviolence, compassion, and kindness. takes a very brave person to do that. How much better, again, would the world be if we all as people took these words to heart and lived by them? Now, let me ask you, when was the last time you folks heard a good Gandhi joke? Been a while, right? All right. So, Gandhi's on a very, very long fast, and his mother slips into his tent, and she says, "Mahatma, you're so skinny. Have a cookie. No one's going to notice." That's why I don't tell too many Gandhi jokes anymore. And the other man he admired and followed was Jesus. Jesus' philosophy of forgiveness was characterized by unlimited mercy and belief that forgiveness frees people from anger and bitterness. Jesus taught that people should forgive others as they have been forgiven, and that God would forgive those who forgive others. So folks, when you let someone off the hook, so to say, or truly forgive, and you feel they don't appreciate it, Jesus says God forgives you. Those who forgive others, he forgives. What could be better than that? Here are some ways Jesus taught about forgiveness. Forgiveness is limitless and a means of freedom. Jesus taught that forgiveness frees people from anger, bitterness, and self-righteousness, and allows people to love others more. Forgiveness is a way to restore relationships. How many people don't talk to their best friend or family member for some slight? People say, stay unforgiving for many years or a lifetime. What if you were the first to give in and make contact, even though you felt they wronged you? Letting go of your grudge and needing to be right. From Jesus' viewpoint, that would be a very godly thing to do, to be the first to give in. Forgiveness requires accepting back into one's heart someone who has hurt you and not allowing the wrong to permanently damage your personal relationship. Forgiveness is a way to reflect God's love. Jesus taught that people can reflect God's love by forgiving others. Be a forgiver. I know this takes great courage, but goodness will come back to you, as this is what a great men like King, Gandhi, and Jesus did. Nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people, and I feel the same way about forgiveness, which is one of the hardest things to do in this world. It's for very strong people. And Dr. King showed he could do it. He also said nonviolence chooses love instead of hate. Nonviolence believes the universe is on the side of justice. Beautiful words, and he lived by them. Kim said this morning when she was reading Dr. King, some of his quotes, darkness can drive out darkness. Darkness can't drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate can't drive out hate, only love can. I want to be the white man's brother, but not his brother-in-law. We must learn to live together as brothers, or perish together as fools. Our scientific power has outrun our spiritual power. We have guided missiles and misguided men. Dr. King won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 in Oslo, Norway. King was 35 years old at the time, making him the youngest person to ever receive the Nobel Peace Prize. He was recognized for his leadership and nonviolent resistance to racial injustice in the United States. He also pledged to donate his entire $54,000 to the civil rights movement. I heard a comedian once say he would kill to win a Nobel Peace Prize. Well, I might use that one again. And when we talk about great speeches in the history of the world, we think of JFK's inaugural one when he became president in 1964. and I'm sure we all remember this one, when he famously said, "And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you could do for your country." Or Abraham Lincoln's famous 272-word Gettysburg Address, which he delivered in 1863 in 2 minutes. It was just 272 words. Or Robert F. Kennedy, when he quoted the Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw, and his quote on dreams was, "Some men see things as they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not." And of course, Dr. King's most beautiful speech near the Lincoln Memorial on the March on Washington in 1963, where he said, and again, I cannot eloquate like he did, but he said, and I think this is the most beautiful speech I ever heard. When I heard it, it brought me to tears when I was younger. "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." Wow. What a great orator with so much love and passion and meaning. Thank you, Dr. King, for your extraordinary life. It's been a pleasure for me to honor your life today. So let me start out now with how I came about to write spiritual poems. Well, I was writing spiritual poems, and when I met my first friend this lifetime, who I've known since kindergarten, he couldn't make it today. He wanted to make it, but things didn't work out. And we went out to lunch, and I was sitting with him and his wife. It was during the George Floyd incident, where the police basically choked a black man, cutting off his breath. And I was talking with his wife. She's a lady of color. Her middle name is Avali, which I love so much. And I told her that I was going to write a poem on racism. And I didn't know if I could do it, but I wrote 3 of them. And the one I liked the most, it's in rhyme, it's called Skin Color Rap. And it's the longest one, but I feel it's the most expressive. And then I'll make a very brief comment after. So this is the poem that I wrote a number of years ago. It's a little bit long, but we have some cool air. Maybe we can keep everybody up. Okay. Okay, Skin Color Rap, Undoing the Trap. I was having lunch with Lady Avali. She's a friend of mine who's socially active and quite divine. And during the conversation, we touched upon race, and it brought our thoughts to a far different place. This is a touchy subject that's not easy to embrace. It's heavy and emotionally, and in darkness it is laced. She was born in Detroit, MI. In the years, if you weren't white, it was easy to die. And a lot of our people just had to cry. They never got a fair shot at the American dream, just because their faces didn't look like peaches and cream. All they were allowed to do was pick white cotton, and that is something that has never been forgotten. We can't let them read and write. Let's keep them dumb and not very bright. But the good thing was they still always had their inner light that stayed with them, whether it was day or night. What is this prejudice and fighting really about? Is it the color of someone's skin or one's own darkness that lies buried deep within? So let's look at the heart of racism. Where do we begin? We must all work together to end this painful sin, because everyone we see deserves to win and laugh more and smile more and grin, whether you're the Dalai Lama or Ho Chi Minh. And if you were born white, you had privileges, but it didn't make you right. You might have had it tough, you might have had to scrounge and fight, because everything you perceived was from your limited sight. You were blinded by your unworthiness and feeling uptight. So if someone was of color and looked dark as night, you could project on them with so much delight. You gave to them your inner pain and ugliness with all your might. But that was before you had awoken and the other voice in your mind had arisen and spoken. No longer will you degrade your fellow man, because that's never a very good plan, and make him feel broken and step on his neck until he is croaking. Whether he was born in the South or resides from Hoboken, respect, my brother, this is the new token. And if you were born black, you don't need to lack or feel attacked or give up completely and smoke crack or live in a shack on the poor side of the track or fear being shot in the back by a peace officer or hooded people or a wild pack, and not be afraid to walk down the street without being whacked. And if you were born brown, you don't need to live on the worst side of town because you look a little different and kids in school call you a clown. And you want to feel free to move around without the judgment chains of feeling bound. I think this is a good plan that is very sound. And if the color of your skin is red and you weren't born with the name Thorndike Cornelius III, and they don't even call you by your real name, Fred, but mocking names like Tonto and Pocahontas that you would like to shed, and you lived on very little, mostly corn and bread, and your life was filled with way too much dread, and at an early age, most of your friends were dead, and General Custer wouldn't stop, no matter what your ancestors said. And to escape the world, you just went to bed. But the good news is things are changing, and with this new generation, a healthier lifestyle will be inbred. And who knows, maybe someday they will call you Fred. And if you were born yellow, life hasn't always been so mellow, and you felt a lot of pain that caused you to bellow, and people didn't care if you were a nice gal or fellow, and many times you felt like a small bowl of Jell-O. So this is what I have to tell you. What is this prejudice and fighting really about? Is it the color of someone's skin or one's own darkness that lies buried deep, deep within? So let's look at the heart of racism. Where do we begin? We must all work together to end this painful sin, because everybody we see deserves to win, and laugh more and smile more and grin, whether you're the Dalai Lama or Ho Chi Minh. The past is filled with victims and victimizers, good people, bad people, truth tellers and liars. We can't deny that after the Big Bang, everywhere we looked, destruction rang. But if we hold the past in the present, then the present will be the same as the past, and it will be projected in the future and last and last. And I dare not mention the people that got gassed. But this guilt and unforgiveness in each of us has to be unmasked. It's not easy, but it is a noble task to press the delete button and put the past in the trash faster than running the 100-yard dash. A great man named M.L. King, he made a speech that he had a dream. And from the mountaintop, what came forward was, let freedom ring. He came from spirit, not from the world of bling. He showed us a way with peace, love, and smartness. And he said, we can't fight darkness with darkness. And if darkness was brought to the light, that would be a good thing to do and very bright. We could see a new vision with much clearer sight. It was centuries and lifetimes of sadness and despair, and most of the population didn't even care. But now we're awakening and becoming much more aware, so our future generations can continue to repair. You and I must change our mind about how we think, so we can come back from the edge of the brink. My brothers and sisters, let's together turn the page and remove our inner darkness that set up the stage, and our inner feelings of hopelessness and rage as we locked ourselves in our own man-made cage. When someone is ignorant and full of rage and is looking to hurt and wants to engage, take the higher ground. It does take great courage, but that is sound. But it will serve mankind better all around. It may not be easy, but please give it a try, because this skin color thing just needs to die, both in you and I. And if we're honest with ourselves, and I think we'll all agree, we must learn to truly forgive. That is the key. So all of us human beings can walk around free. But just one more final thing before we go. The more you truly forgive, the more you will know, way beyond the physical world of time, space, and change, in another dimension, on another plane, where we will all be loving and peaceful and no longer insane. Is this prejudice and fighting really about the color of someone's skin, or about one's own darkness that lies buried deep, deep within? So let's look at the heart of racism. Where do we begin? We must all work together to end this painful sin, because everyone we meet deserves to win, and laugh more and smile more and grin, whether you're the Dalai Lama or Ho Chi Minh. Let's also include Gunga Din. And just to end it off, let me toss in my old pal, a tail-wagging, happy Rin Tin Tin. Well, thank you for going through that. I was going to only read my wife fell asleep when I did it, so I was thinking, do I really want to read 22 verses? But I don't know. You inspired me last week. You read something, so I said, I was going to read 8 verses and keep you awake. But anyway, and if those of you who don't know who Gunga Din was, he came from a Rudyard Kipling poem. It was about a guy in India that helped an English soldier live. And Rin Tin Tin was a dog hero during World War I, and they made a TV show about him, which I watched as a kid. So, just another minute or so. I hope you get to see that prejudice is very, very deep, and it's in all of our thought system. It's in all of us, our thought system, regardless of the color of our skin. Biblical people say the devil influences us all, and I use the name that the Course in Miracles uses as the ego mind. It's not just in white people or black people or policemen or rich people or politicians or dictators. This darkness is in all of us. Here's a quote from A Course in Miracles I'd like to read. It uses the male pronoun, but it applies to women as spirit is gender-free. And it says, as you see him, you will see yourself. As you treat him, you will treat yourself. As you think of him, you will think of yourself. Never forget this, for in him you will find yourself or lose yourself. Let me close and say, let's work on being more loving and forgiving to ourselves and to others. As we treat another, we treat ourselves. We all have inner love and guidance that goes with us everywhere we go. Whether your guidance is Jesus, the Holy Spirit, Moses, Buddha, Allah, saints, angels, loved ones, family members, pets, love is all around. So ask for help, be quiet, and be open to receive. And the more we practice, the better we get, because a better world depends on each of us thinking better thoughts. And my book should be coming out shortly, called Erasmus Joseph Lyon, A Spiritual Awakening. And Reverend Gina said I will be able to do a talk in the church, probably not as long, and a book signing, hopefully in March when it gets released. And you will be able to hear my podcast on my website or on YouTube, which are short 10-minute spiritual, psychological, philosophical, and humorous talks under the podcast title, How to Think About Anything. I will keep you informed. Okay, my friends, God bless you. Peace and love to you all. Thank you.